There is something magical about coffee. Right now, I'm enjoying beans from Kenya and Colombia, two countries worlds apart, yet connected through this drink. Every sip holds layers of stories, of geography, history, and even conflict. I want to take you on a journey, one that starts right here in Istanbul and stretches across continents and centuries. Today, as much as coffee is center of catching up with friends and morning routine, coffee is also at the heart of geopolitics. It's the second most traded commodity in the world after oil, and just like oil, it's deeply affected by global events. In this video, we will explore the fascinating intersection of coffee and geopolitics, how these little beans has shaped economies, sparked trade wars, and even influenced diplomacy. So sit back, grab your favorite brew, because this is a tale of beans, borders, and beyond. If you wonder why your coffee cup is becoming more expensive every day, it's because of two major effects currently taking place. But we'll come to this a bit later. First, let's dive into a bit of history. With me is my friend Mohammed Tahiri, who is a true coffee lover, and he has done some research on the history and the journey of coffee.
Well, it all started in Ethiopia actually, and we have a couple of stories of how coffee was found. And the main story is that there was a shepherd called Kaldi who found coffee, but then we don't have the continuation of that story. So we know that the beans were found and were being used, but we don't know about the drink. The stronger story that we have is that the Sufis who were going from North Africa to Hajj, they passed through Ethiopia, got hold of these beans, and when they were in Yemen, they actually turned the beans into a drink. So the first time we know about coffee as a drink in a cup is because the Sufis used to use it to stay up at night so they can worship.
So, and how does the coffee plant from Yemen move then spread across the world?
That's a very interesting question. Well, it actually took some time, but it was when the Ottoman Empire took hold of Yemen, it was then that the coffee actually spread, especially through Hajj, through the pilgrimage. It was a very important event where coffee was being marketed. And soon in the 15th century in Istanbul, two brothers from Damascus opened the first coffee shop. And hence, because that was, a big empire, a big capital city, Istanbul, the whole world got to know about this magical drink.
Yeah, that's very interesting because we're talking about the 15th, 16th century.
Exactly.
What happened between 16th and 19th century? We talk about 300 years. Tell me some interesting story in between these three centuries.
Yeah. Well, there are many interesting stories that happened in between the 16th and the 19th century while the Ottoman Empire was controlling the coffee market. Of course, coffee was introduced as a drink, and of course it was controversial in the very beginning. Because, some of the Shaykhul Islams of the Ottoman Empire, like Abu Saud Effendi, actually deemed it to be haram in the very beginning, so it was banned. And coffee was banned before that as well in Mecca, it was banned before that in Cairo, but you'll be surprised that everyone who banned it did not end up in a good situation.
But why did they ban at the first place?
Well, it looks in the first place like it's a religious position, but actually, in fact, when we look at it closely, it's purely political. So for example, when coffee was banned in Cairo for the first time, it was banned because the governor of Cairo was not happy that someone was literally becoming so famous with this drink. And when the Sultan actually learned that the governor is banning coffee without his approval, he actually had the governor killed. And Sultan Murad, for example, he also banned coffee in the 16th century in Istanbul. It was actually a very long ban for almost 6 years. And when he died, people were happy because coffee was unbanned again. And basically, when we see closely is that because coffee and coffee shops and coffee houses were becoming a thing where people were discussing, debating, and having conversations. So it was always not a very good idea for people who were in the ruling society.
And from Ottoman Empire, we do know that they introduced the coffee to Europe. How that transition happened?
Interestingly, so the first time that the West got hold of coffee was when the Ottomans were actually turning back from Vienna. When they were coming back from Vienna, they had to leave a lot of coffee by the Viennese walls. And luckily, there were some people who had experienced life in the Ottoman Empire who then actually introduced the coffee into the Viennese life. And again, at some point, there was an Ottoman envoyage that went to Paris, and also coffee was introduced in Paris as well. So those are the first kind of communications or the first introductions of coffee to the Western world. And
then came European traders. They fell in love with the coffee and brought it to cities like Venice and Vienna. Before long, coffee became a symbol of sophistication and intellect in Europe, fueling revolutions and enlightenment. So every time you see someone sipping an espresso in European capital coffees, remember it all started here. As coffee popularity exploded, European powers saw an opportunity. They couldn't grow coffee in Europe, so they turned to their colonies in tropical regions. The Dutch established coffee plantations in Java, the French in Caribbean, and the Portuguese in Brazil. By the 19th century, coffee was the backbone of colonial economies. But the cost of this global demand was devastating. In places like Haiti, enslaved people were forced to work under brutal conditions to produce coffee for European markets. These plantations were a tool of control, reinforcing the power dynamics between the colonizers and the colonized. Yet, coffee also became a symbol of resistance. In Haiti, enslaved workers led a revolution that didn't just free the country, it toppled the coffee industry that had oppressed them. Similarly, in Ethiopia, the birthplace of coffee, leaders resisted colonization, ensuring the country remained independent. Fast forward to today, and coffee is $200 billion global industry. Brazil, Vietnam, and Colombia dominate production, while countries like the US, Germany, and Japan lead consumption. But here's the catch. The countries that grow coffee often don't reap the rewards. Small-scale farmers in Ethiopia or Honduras make just a fraction of what their beans sell for in the global markets. Geopolitics play a huge role in this imbalance. Trade agreements, tariffs, and global cooperation dictate who profits and who struggles. Multinational corporations like Nestle and Starbucks control much of the market, leaving small-scale farmers with little bargaining power. While they profit billions, many farmers earn less than $2 a day. Farmers face high cost of production, but corporations drive prices down by sourcing from the cheapest markets, often ignoring their wages. This imbalance keeps small-scale farmers trapped in poverty, while companies market premium coffee at inflated prices. But all is not lost. From Istanbul to New York, ethical coffee movements are gaining momentum. Fair trade, direct trade, and sustainable farming practices are changing the game, giving farmers a fairer share of the profits. So next time you enjoy a cup of coffee, think about the journey it took to get to your hands, from the farmers into the field to the geopolitics that shape its prices and availability. So let's come back to the question of why your coffee cup becoming more expensive every day. The Red Sea is currently experiencing significant disruption due to ongoing attack by Houthi rebels on commercial shipping. These attacks, which include the use of drones and missiles, have escalated as a form of protest against the Israelis' intervention and ongoing genocide on Gaza. Major shipping companies have rerouted their vessels around Africa to avoid the area, leading to increasing shipping times, higher costs, and potential impacts on global trade. The US and allies have responded with military action targeting Houthis' positions in Yemen to secure the sea lines. Ships carrying coffee from Ethiopia and Vietnam are now taking a much longer route around Africa, significantly increasing shipping times and costs. In Europe and around the world, coffees are feeling the pinch with delayed shipments and rising prices, especially for Vietnamese Robusta, where coffee sits in warehouses waiting for ships, while in Ethiopia beans are delayed, impacting their income. And the second factor is global warming. Coffee is one of the most climate-sensitive crops in the world. It needs very specific conditions to thrive: the right altitude, temperature, and rainfall. Most of the world's coffee, about 70%, comes from Arabica beans, which are particularly vulnerable to rising temperatures and unpredictable weather patterns. But here is the problem. As global temperatures rise, the land suitable for growing coffee is shrinking. By some estimates, up to 50% of the land currently used for coffee farming could become unusable by 2050. And that's not just bad news for farmers, it's bad news for coffee drinkers everywhere. Take Ethiopia, for example, the birthplace of coffee. Climate models predict that some of Ethiopia's key coffee growing regions could lose up to 60% of their suitability by mid-century. Similar stories are playing out in Central America, where farmers are already grappling with droughts, hurricanes, and pests like the coffee leaf rust. For small-scale coffee farmers who make up the majority of the industry, it's an existential threat. Many of these farmers already live on the edge of poverty, earning less than $2 a day. But it's not just about the farmers. The entire coffee supply chain is affected. When production drops, prices spike, and coffee companies are forced to pass those costs on the consumer or find cheaper, often less sustainable sources of beans. While coffee brings people together, it has also been the center of global struggles. In the 20th century, major coffee-producing countries like Brazil and Colombia relied heavily on coffee exports. When prices dropped, their economies suffered, leading to social and political instability. Then there is climate change, which threatens the future of coffee itself. Rising temperatures and unpredictable weather patterns are making it harder to grow coffee, especially in regions like Central America and East Africa. If we don't address these challenges, coffee might become a luxury only a few people could afford. So the next time you drink coffee, take a moment to think about its journey. Think about the farmers who grew it, the traders who move it, and the history it carries in every sip. Because as Istanbul has taught me, coffee is more than just a morning ritual. It's a lens through which we can understand the world. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe and share. Let's keep exploring the stories that connect us. Bye for now and see you in the next episode.